All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Dustin, for giving a great overview about the intersection of AI and crypto. Today, we're going to be focusing more on why AI needs crypto. And so, before we get started, just love each of you to give a brief, introduction to who you are, and then a little bit of a background as well into what you're building, or how you're contributing to crypto and AI.
For sure. Great to be here. Thanks, Messari, for inviting. I'm Illia. I'm co-founder of Near Protocol, which is a entry point to Web3, the easiest to use and arguably most scalable blockchain. Historically, before blockchain, I was working in AI. I was at Google Research. I'm one of the co-authors of the paper of Transformers, which is technologies that created ChatGPT, Midjourney, and all the other craziness. And now I'm indeed exploring some of the intersections with some of the projects we're doing, both in Near and kind of in the larger ecosystem around Web3 and AI.
Thank you. I'm Jacob. I'm a core developer at BitTensor. What we're doing is we're taking the computational power of digital commodity markets, Bitcoin style mining, towards training and inferencing machine learning models using decentralized infrastructure. Before that, I was at Google and briefly worked for DARPA building neuromorphic chips. But now this is my full time.
My name is Greg. I'm the CEO founder for Overclock Labs, the creators of Akash Network. Akash is the world's first supercloud, essentially a superset of private and public clouds globally. It's permissionless, it's decentralized, and with a offering that can essentially consolidate GPUs. So right now, Akash is the only place you can get a permissionless access to H100s at a price point that's set by you, the user. So super excited to be on this panel. I have deep respect for Illia and Jacob here, up here. So looking forward to Sammy's questions.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and just jump into it. So if we're going to zoom out a little bit, traditionally a lot of the AI research and development was being done within academia, where it was all being open sourced. Recently, we've seen this shift towards a lot of this development happening within big tech, and they're doing it behind their closed doors. A lot of it is not open source. It's mainly just closed source. What we're also seeing is that, the cost of developing models to compete with some of the state-of-the-art technology or AI models that exist is increasing. So it's becoming increasingly prohibitive for smaller companies or smaller groups to kind of compete. And so the question I want to pose to you guys is, is this a problem? Is this something we should be concerned with? And what potential risks exist if, we keep going down this path?
Well, I think we can draw some parallels between what's happening in the industry and the early internet. Obviously, ARPANET and DARPA created the internet in the 1980s. It was a research challenge primarily, a little bit like what you were describing. And then with the onset of the internet really into the cultural consciousness, into consumers' hands, we had a battle for who was going to control the internet. And that was when the battle around net neutrality was warring. And you had a lot of cyberpunks out there who fought to keep the internet decentralized and not controlled by ISPs. Obviously, they wanted to own the infrastructure. They wanted to monetize it as much as possible. And because they fought to keep the internet decentralized back then, we're here today, right? Everything that we're doing, all of the competition and innovation that we've seen over the last 30 years, like absolutely incredible amount of innovation, Bitcoin itself was possible because there was a cultural fight. And so the open source contributors to artificial intelligence right now, like the E/acceleration people, the ones that are fighting against the Sam Altmans of the world, they're like the cyberpunks of the 1980s. And I think that crypto has this very, very important position in this fight because we basically are building technologies off military grade tech. It's like we build technologies that can be resistant to nuclear strikes. All because of Bitcoins needing to resist the absolute centralization of money and fight against government. So we have that lineage, and I think that the intersection here, we need to bring the crypto power, the decentralization and the resistance to outside and centralized control into the AI world to help these cyberpunks effectively stop AI from being controlled by these large corporations. And of course, they're going to try, right? They tried in the 1990s. They're going to they want to control it with regulation. They want all the GPUs to themselves. Of course, and we risk a centralization of power, a centralization of value, sucking up into the world coins and the Sam Altmans of the world.
So maybe to take another kind of aspect is the kind of from perspective of business models. Right now, there's either a kind of open source, you do your work, you put it out, and everybody can use it, and you don't receive any value from it. Or you do it closed source, you keep your model, and you give somebody an API, or you sell a service, or whatever it is, and you only have this kind of two sides of the market right now, and this leads to just economically to this fact that people want to keep the models internally and kind of build a service around it and capture the value, because it does take money to build it. It takes money to attract talent. And so where crypto comes in is crypto has been innovating on how to monetize open source, how to build how to build a new way of compute in such a way that people are still paying for transacting, but it is an equitable market and open market for everybody to participate. And so kind of practically speaking, we need crypto to kind of open up the business model and offer a different type of value chain that doesn't right now exist, where you can have model marketplaces where the model is maybe not available to everyone to see openly, but can be used by anyone and can be proven that anybody can use it, right? It also means that it's not going to be sensors to remove from you, right, when you have built all your business on top of it, right, which is completely possible right now with some of the centralized players. So it kind of opens up the more equitable market on top. So kind of from perspective of like why this is happening right now is somewhat purely economics, right? Yes, there's motivation, but like at the end, the economics trumps any kind of political movement from my perspective. And so we need to kind of change the economics here to actually drive forward innovation, and as well as open up to all of the important nodes around kind of open information that exist as well.
I agree. I mean, so we're at an interesting crossroads, right? It's crossroads between freedom over feudalism. I mean, AI is so powerful. People that control AI is going to be our new lords. That's undeniable. But what's the solution? Is the open systems going to be winning this war, and how so? Illia brought up a very interesting point. Like, is there a business model that we can build around openness, right? And I think there is, right? A lot of us are working towards that. One of the key goals of Akash is to enable open source contributors, creators, a viable business model where right now the landscape is kind of weird, where you have the big clouds or the big players essentially capturing a lot of the open source value more than the actual creator itself. So if there's a viable way to monetize an attribution of an author, I think that's a world that we'd love to see. And some of the work we're doing is some things around paying back royalties to the creators. With smart contracts, you can prove the authorship of a particular piece of code, and how can we trace back a monetizable value chain that can go all the way to the attributed author, right? So, but doing it in the open is what makes me exciting, and this is incredible to be doing with these folks here.
So, building on that, in the past few months, there was a paper that came out that showed that GPT-4's performance had actually decreased compared to when it first initially came out. And, the general public really had no idea why. And this kind of just demonstrated, how much of a black box these models by these centralized providers were. What we also saw a few months ago was a memo that was leaked from Google, which basically was their internal team coming out and saying, hey, we can't compete with open source AI. It's a losing strategy. And so the question I want to pose to you guys, which is basically the topic of this panel, is, how can these decentralized networks contribute to the whole open source AI movement? Is it let me pass that to you, Greg, first.
Yeah, you started from the bottom. What does AI need? Chips. Well, what does AI need? Energy, right? So you start from the bottom. Who has the energy? Who has the chips? Ultimately, are the ones that will host the computer software that can run the AI. So let's start with decentralizing the foundation. By decentralizing the cloud, that means the ability to process data and run applications to a point where you can run from your house or a facility where you have renewable energy, right? Anywhere in the world with enough internet connectivity. I think we start off from there, and that's what the layer Akash is operating at. And then you go up the chain to other specialized functions, be it evaluation, be it ensuring that you have proper evals that BitTensor, and I kind of ruined it as to how to explain, but BitTensor is working on making better trained, higher quality data, right? So that's done in a decentralized way. So and you keep going up the stack, and eventually, you will have an entire infrastructure that is decentralized through and through. That's how we look at it.
I like the premise of the question is, everyone noticed this decrease in performance of GPT, and it's interesting because imagine this future where we're all just plugged into the GPT interface, and the quality goes down, and we have nothing. We can't do anything about it. It's just like, oh yeah, your ration of AI for the week has been decreased. Send in a letter to the Department of AI, and that's what could happen if we suffer creating an industry that's really anti-competitive. Obviously there's alternatives that people can use. You can go use Claude, right? You can go use BitTensor, and thank God, right? Thank God that these things exist. But I think it's funny that's the premise, right? It's okay for, I think, OpenAI to be a black box as long as there's competition for them as a company.
Yeah, I would say that kind of what we're trying to achieve is, like, as things are getting open source, like at the end, you don't want to have this big companies that, like, you will be interacting all the time, giving all your data, like, even if they are saying they're not using it. And so I think the important part here is also to think how this will become more personalized, how this will become running on your phone, on your device, and it's probably not that the whole model, like the state-of-the-art model, will be doing that, but we can also achieve, partial, like, inference, etc., on local devices. And I think part of it is also just like evolving technology beyond kind of current state-of-the-art is also needed, where we're not just relying on kind of this massive clusters that will be providing us with answers to everything, but actually have a more kind of personal relationship with something that belongs to us. And again, I think like where crypto here comes in is really more around how to incentivize that, how to create a model in which this will work and have an economic value to somebody. Because right now the best open source model is developed by Meta, and although it's great that they open sourced it, and like I truly believe that whoever is not as good as whoever is state of the art will actually has huge motivation to open source it, to the point that like Google, hey, we should not be competing, like we cannot be competing with open source. We should be joining it and leading it, because what it does, it gives you the power of everybody else who's researching to actually building on top of you. And that's what Meta right now sees. Like their tech stack is now used by all the open source researchers to build on top and innovate. But I think like we need to go one step further and think, how do we get like to an open model that is trained by kind of open source stack and then is leveraged by everyone.
Yeah, thank God for Llama, right? And Jan LeCun, who really was the person who pushed that at Facebook. But can we rely on the altruism of having a really amazing researcher at Facebook or Meta forever? I don't think we can. I think that we need to build technologies that bridge the gap between monetization and open source. And crypto has that super quality where things are open, people can join, it's permissionless, it's distributed, but there's also monetization. And a couple months ago, there was Sam Altman and Ilya Sutskever on a stage talking shit about open source, frankly. And they were saying, well, they're always going to be behind us. They're always going to be a 3 months or 4 months or 1 year because a centralized corporation just has the money and frankly, we're suckling on the tit of quantitative easing from BlackRock. So how can the open source community possibly compete with that? And I think it's this ability to integrate monetization into the open source community or provide monetization of models, whether it's contributing compute to train them or do inferences, or GPUs like a cache or data, like we'll talk about later. That's how we can actually build things that are bigger and more powerful than centralized companies like OpenAI, because we benefit from both of the things that make those industries great. So you get monetization, you can get funding, but you also get that permissionless system that open source has, and is just unbelievably powerful.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this problem quite a lot. So now we are running our first foundational model training on Akash, 24,000 A100 hours. It's not cheap, right? It's very, very expensive. How do we create a mechanism where that funding comes from the common and the value capture goes back to the common, right?
Launch a token.
Yes, crypto GPT.
No, but seriously, I mean, I think Juan from Protocol Labs kind of had a talk about this, where what really token can serve as a way to borrow from future, right? And the way to, as it's as any other kind of way to fund things. It can be a crowdfunding, it can be some form where, as you are right now, need resources right now to pay for training to build something that is a common good or public good that can be used now by many. If you have a way to monetize the inference afterwards, right, because it's running through a network, there's transaction happening, you can then bring that value back to whoever contributed there early on. Call it token, call it NFT, it doesn't matter, right? What's a medium, but the medium is, borrowing in a way from the future usage to really power and build some common good that is accessible to everyone. Cryptographically proven that is accessible to everyone, and cryptographically proven that you're getting the same results that everybody else.
So anyone looking for an idea to launch a token, just gave the alpha here.
Too much alpha being shared here, honestly. So let's talk about GPUs for a little bit. So Semi-Analysis released a newsletter probably a month ago where they were talking about the GPU rich and the GPU poor. So the GPU rich are these entities like Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, which have access to thousands of high-end GPUs. And then they mentioned the GPU poors, which were I don't know if they called them out, but it's the Hugging Faces.
The rest of us.
Together. And, they didn't name drop crypto, but, presumably crypto. And the argument they were making is that, the top talent, the top developers are more incentivized to go to these centralized organizations because that's where they have access to all these high-end GPUs where they can play around and do whatever type of research they want to do. And, a lot of the developers are at these GPU poor entities are more focused on optimizations, where the work that they're working on might not matter if, the GPU shortage goes away in a few years. And so that just brings me back to a question about, how can we get more top talent within crypto? Are we stuck where, because we don't have access to these GPUs, these top researchers might not be incentivized to contribute?
I don't believe that the top researchers are at the best at these corporations. I think that they're out in the open source.
Love that.
They are there. They're just not enabled. Right? The difference is that about the engineers who went to Google and DeepMind and OpenAI, because they got to participate in these large training runs, and they also have marketing teams behind them. But I have no doubt in my mind that the quality of the people out there in the open source and the crypto world is 10 times better. And not just quality, but also quantity. I mean, and I know this firsthand because I have a mining network, and the people that compete there are so intelligent, and you would never ever find them with an HR department. They haven't written any papers, but they are just unbelievably intelligent. And once we fund these people, I think that the premise of the question kind of goes away.
Yeah, it comes so with closed source software you can go fast, but with open source you can go far. Yes, there are people that are doing optimizations to do distributed training, vertically focused on individual models, but guess what? There are hundreds of these people. Hundreds of these people doing hundreds of optimizations collectively will contribute to a larger shared, code base or shared research, right? So research in the open always beats research in the closed, because there's just more people looking at your code or looking at your work and contributing and building upon it.
Yeah, I would say maybe some data points. You need about $10 million to have a commit with like one of the cloud providers to get access to A100s. That's kind of your, buy-in stakes to play in this. And so it is a fair bit of money, although in AI right now, a lot of startups are able to raise that and actually get access to that. So it's not just like the, few big companies. There's kind of a medium tail of startups that are able to raise that. But it's still a lot, right? And it's still a pretty hard line to get to. I think on the other side, what Llama, as I mentioned, have shown is that maybe these optimizations individually wouldn't matter, right, as Greg said, but together, like, they provide actually something that then can be brought back to even to people who have the resources to train large models. And so, low rank, for example, adaptation is something that came out of open source because they don't have a large machines. And so now, instead of spending kind of hundreds of GPU hours, you can do it in minutes. And so there's definitely like a benefit kind of from open source contributions there. I think the question is how to kind of align everyone into single goal, and how to create kind of a more almost like movement versus a individual like kind of sparks of work, right? And I think we haven't seen that. Like something like Linux has created a movement that really everyone was excited to contribute and build on and then use themselves, and that contributions together were more valuable than and so I think we need something like that where it's almost like under a single brand, under a single motivation, we have a lot of work being contributed and pushed, and it's kind of independent of any single specific company. And I think that's the challenge right now, is just like creating such a movement right now where there's every company that's kind of in the arena is trying to push their own narrative and their own story. Like, we kind of need something that's like outside of all of this, and everybody's contributing from it, but it's not driven by this. So I think like that, having something like this will attract talent and be able to like coalesce people, because it will be something that combines some of the things that Jacob said around like values and open source and kind of potentially fighting back, but at the same time we'll be providing this kind of core community as well that people will be targeting at.
There are sparks in the EAC community that's coming together pretty rapidly.
Yeah, but they also anti-crypto, I think. At least EAC community is not very, but like some of them are pretty anti-crypto.
Yeah, most of the AI is anti-crypto. It's just I don't.
Yeah, so we kind of need to find like a way to bridge all those things together. Like that's the thing, is like
bridge.
Yeah, we've been working on it.
So, I mean, another critique we get, I mean, not me, but I think the space gets a lot from the centralized AI players, is that decentralized training is just so inefficient, right? Like the overhead of communicating back and forth. So like in traditional training, you have these GPUs that are in one data center and they're interconnected with one another. When you're training in a distributed nature where I have a GPU, Jacob has a GPU, you're having to send information back and forth, and it introduces a lot of latency into the process. And so is this a solvable problem, or is there always just going to be a trade-off that these end users are going to have to make, where it's like, okay, I'm willing to take slower, more inefficient training for a cheaper price?
No. I think one thing to realize is that the entire industry of artificial intelligence started with people training on single GPUs in their home computers. And so the techniques of gradient descent and even like asynchronous training across clusters, they happened inside data centers to begin with. That was the environment that all of these techniques evolved in. And so therefore they fit that environment perfectly. It makes total sense. But what if it had happened the other way around? What if we'd started in a decentralized environment, built the tools and the techniques for doing training in that environment, and then gone to a centralized environment? It would be the same thing. It'd be like, well, it doesn't make any sense to do that in a centralized way. Why are you using gradient descent? Why are you doing this technique? That doesn't make any sense. And I think that it's going to be the same types of innovations that we're going to need to reinvent the way in which we do training in a decentralized setting. And people are doing this. Like, I think it's like a really, really hard thing to do. It's a little bit like putting a square peg in a triangular hole. But one of the ways we can do it is by reframing the problem, and thinking, okay, well, gradient descent was designed for a data center, right? Let's do a lot of really fast updates and share a lot of data. But what if we think about, let's do second or third order methods. Let's design the algorithms to work in a decentralized setting to take advantage of the innovations and the advantages of decentralized systems. Like, we have so much more compute power out there that is unused, that if it was connected would be able to contribute to the training of these large models. It's just that we're using the wrong algorithms. So I think I don't really know the answer to that question, what the algorithm is. I think if I did, I'd be a trillionaire, but it's coming, I believe.
Yeah, it's a difference between cost of compute and cost of communication, right? So if your cost of compute is higher than your cost of communication is higher than cost of compute, you cannot. The other way, yes, right? So how do you optimize these both is where the techniques lie under, essentially.
But yeah, I agree. If you just put enough brains to this problem, I think it could potentially be solved. And I know Jensen is one project that is working on developing more of these like distributed training architectures and techniques. And so
I was working on this problem like 4 or 5 years ago with the HiveMind people from Yandex. And one of the things that's really interesting about the artificial intelligence industry is that they really hate crypto. They just think we're all just scam artists. So it's really hard to fight through the weeds and really explain that we're really using serious technology. And they'll be like, no, we can't use incentives. That's a bad idea. Money, no, that's evil. And I'm like, no, money is how we're going to make it happen. Because no, you're not. It's not going to be desktop computers. I'm sorry, the bandwidth is just not good enough. But once you integrate incentives into these decentralized computational problems, the whole compute network that you have adapts to the way that you've constructed the market to fix these problems. Oh, you needed bandwidth? If you can structure the problem as one that requires bandwidth to perform better, people will go out and buy ISPs so that they can do this, right? So I think that if we can frame the incentives properly, and this is something I'm working on, then we can do it. And convincing these, let's say, more classical machine learning engineers that they need to use incentives and it's not a bad thing. If we can do that, we're going to really make it work.
Totally agree. I feel like we just touched the surface. However, we are out of time. So thank you for joining me here, guys. I had a good time. I think the audience had a good time. And yeah, we'll see you guys later.